Hey Harry, how you doing today?
Hey Jeff, great. How are you?
Fantastic. What excited to have you on and to chat. What's been the highlight of your day so far?
I had breakfast with my daughter.
Oh, nice. That's
Yeah,
awesome. That's awesome.
yeah. I
Did you
did have
have,
some good client stuff, but it's less interesting to be honest.
yeah, but breakfast nice. Did you have what'd you eat?
She has pancakes. She loves pancakes. I had eggs.
That's so awesome.
Oh,
I have a
exciting.
7-year-old daughter, and any day I get to hang out with her is a good day. So that's awesome.
There you go.
Very very cool. Well, I wanted to start out with just if you could just tell us a little bit about introduce yourself and tell us what you're working on now, just to set the context for our conversation.
Sure, yeah. I'm Harry Sims. I run a company called Outbound Works. After probably about 12, 15 years chasing strangers for meetings where I'm obsessed with it. In that time, I've built 4 SDR teams from zero, usually very, very early stage, no brand, no demand engine. Did some product stuff with Scratchpad. Some great, very, very fast, very, very efficient. Some not so great, and those are the ones you tend to learn from. I've also advised dozens of others on getting outbound going from like 0 to 1, and I'm really good at only 2 things. Running experiments to find these low volume, high conversion plays ready to scale, and training, coaching others to kind of do that and love outbound like I do. Yeah, so that's me.
Amazing. And I love the focus when I was looking at people to reach out to talk to. I just love the focus, and you just brought it here. It's like I'm good at 2 things, and I want to dive into those 2 things. So when we were
Yeah.
talking before we went live, you mentioned how most people do experimentation wrong, and they have the wrong ideas about it. Can you just tell us kind of your thoughts about what are people getting wrong when they're doing experimentation?
Yeah, and the audience on LinkedIn will know this. They see these posts every day. They say, hey, this subject line led to 17 meetings last week. And if you said that to a CRO expert or a product growth expert, they would laugh at you, right? Because that's not what your data tells you, right?
Right.
What you did there was create a hook for LinkedIn, and if you really, really ask them the questions, they know that that's not what their data is telling them, right?
Right. Right.
That's random acts of outbound right there, right?
Random acts
So,
about I like that.
yeah, I think the thing we have to agree on first is that outbound is really just a bunch of experiments and they're non-scientific. You can't apply the fundamental rules of scientific experimentation to outbound. And the main one, or there's two main ones, but all of them, nearly none of them apply, is the random selection, right? We're not randomly selecting anyone in outbound. We have a hypothesis as to why we want to reach out to these people, and that's what you're testing. There's no randomness in it. And there's another one in terms of like correlation and causation, but when we lie to ourselves a lot when we think we're doing like scientific experimentation, and we also lie to ourselves when we believe that this is linear, that there is a playbook to grow.
You
Really
mean
what people...
there's like a natural law of growth that can just be discovered? Is that what you mean when you say there's no
Yeah,
playbook?
there's a beginning, middle, and end. It's linear. Actually, when you've been in these environments, what there really is a bunch of experiments over and over again, and you find stuff that works. You add volume, and it stops working so effectively. So you have to find more and more and more. So
Interesting.
the thing that I really recommend, and I try to align with people on, is that we accept that this is an experiment. And let's say if you're really good, 1 in 5 are really going to hit, and you're going to add like volume to. The other 4, 3 of them you're going to kill in the first 30 days. 1 or 2 you might continue to optimize and try and find some efficiency, but like we have to agree that this is an experiment,
And when
and
you say
most people don't.
are you essentially saying everything is an experiment? And that's what you mean by saying there's no playbook. That even the ones that are working really well, you still need to think about an experiment because as you add more and more volume, eventually they're going to decay. Is that kind of what you're
Correct.
saying?
Correct. Efficiency starts to decline over time, and that's human nature. And I think it's happening faster than ever today. Actually, I think we need to take a book out of the growth marketing types and the product growth types. Reforge, Lenny, Elena. We need to start thinking like them on outbound. And I think if I had to like summarize why I love this so much, it's because I think like that.
Interesting.
Like I'm obsessed with finding those new little experiments and trying to find efficiency. It makes me excited every single day still.
That's so cool. Yeah, so a couple threads to pull on that. I think you said some interesting things there. So one, you said we need to stop thinking about experiments like scientific. And I think you said the 2 key differences there because one, you're not taking a random sample of the population.
No.
It's a hypothesis driven. And then I think the second thing you said there is there's maybe some less universal applicability.
Yeah.
And that has implications for conclusions you draw about causation. So what I'm curious about there is like what are the implications of the differences? Like once you acknowledge, okay, this isn't really a scientific experiment,
No.
it's a different thing. What are the implications of realizing that?
I think you relax, right?
Okay.
That's the first thing. Like you relax and say, I don't know everything, and this one play that I think is gonna save my career you realize it's probably not, and if it does, it will save you for a couple months nowadays.
And then you have something new.
And I've been there, right?
Right.
I've seen this. It's happened to me many times. So I think that's one of the main aspects is like you realize that the things you tried last quarter or at your last gig are not going to be as effective or guaranteed to be as effective in the new gig or the next quarter.
Got it.
It also, I think, buys you, if you can communicate that up and down the org, and like communicate that we're experimenting to drive these business outcomes, I think it buys you, time, credibility, feedback, input. And I don't trust many, I usually work with the CEO, I don't trust many CEOs, and I challenge them very early on that they think, hey, all we need to do is add volume to these types of people. And I question them, I say, hey, has that ever worked, right? And then they may refer to their time at Salesforce 15 years ago, and it's like, yeah, different world, dude.
Company, very different time.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And then you said, okay, I really found that interesting. Like, okay, so the outbound go-to-market experimentation, we need to adopt some things from product and how they think about running experiments. What are some of the what are some of the things that you see that product is doing in how they approach experiments and how they think about experiments that you think we need to adopt in sales outbound?
Yeah, great question. So I did a bit of, Reforge digging. I think my time like digging through Reforge and like taking some of the stuff, the courses, etc., was as important as when I read Predictable Prospecting, Predictable Revenue all those years ago. I think it's much more applicable today than that book was back then. So I think two things really, and it's really how we measure these things and how we always have to close the loop. I like to set a North Star metric for every single experiment that's based on lift from baseline. So let's say you have a 2% account to meeting conversion rate today. Reach out to 100 accounts, you book 2 meetings, that's 2%.
Got it. Yeah.
You want to get to 7 based on a 90-day closed loop experiment. But within that 90 days, you set yourself crawl, walk, and run metrics. And those metrics can be a bit more detailed and a bit more extensive, but it's all in service to the North Star metric. People try a bunch of stuff in sales all the time. Like if you watch a really good outbound person, they're making hundreds of decisions in a day. Changes, blah, 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 blah. But they're never closing the loop.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You used this term, you said a closed loop experiment. Can you explain what that is just so we're...
Yeah, just calling an experiment to the end. And before you start something new, you say, hey, here's the business, here's the impact on the funnel that I want it to create. And so I even break that down.
Taking the time to really look across all the data and make a conclusion.
Yeah, that's another problem. Like lots of people don't really understand their own funnel, but you can have a very simple funnel in outbound, right? Accounts and contacts that are active, sales activities, meetings booked, qualified opportunities created. You can go all the way up and down you want. And just understanding your conversion rates between those things, those inputs and outputs, everyone should know that.
Right.
But they don't. Lots of people don't even look at the efficiency of the inputs and outputs. They just look at the inputs and outputs, right? And actually what we want to show is the change.
When you say efficiency of inputs and outputs, you're saying not just the total volume, but the conversion rates across them.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the interesting part, right? That's the interesting part.
Right.
Because you'll find lots of people out here that say they're scaling, they're adding volume, or maybe they're adding outputs, but actually, if you look at the efficiency, they're getting less efficient over time, which is actually the opposite of scale. Kevin Dorsey calls it scaling suck.
Scaling suck. I like that. Okay, so I love that thing is start with the North Star metric. That's one thing we need to do. Framing everything as an experimentation. If we take a step back, let's say I'm new to my outbound career, or maybe I'm a founder and I want to start working on outbound. I think outbound is maybe a way I want to do go-to-market. How would I start running experiments? Like, is there a process or a framework that you encourage people to use?
Yeah, good question. There is so much noise out there in outbound, like who to listen to, whatever, so many things. You get lost very quickly. I try to think about outbound as 5 simple questions. Sorry, I'm coughing. And this all came out of, I got fired from the only big job I ever had, and I did 50 coaching calls with SDRs and sales leaders. And they're all talking about having a better email template or a better script or a better cadence. But the actual problems in their play were much, much deeper, right? And I had no context, so I had to ask them a bunch of questions to get the context.
This is one of the reasons why I was really excited to talk to you, is because I feel like when you look at a lot of people talking about outbound, it's a lot of tactics. And I think it makes sense because those tend to do well. Tips and tricks perform well on LinkedIn. It feels very tangible, things you can do tomorrow. But like you said, it seems like a lot of the problems are actually are much more fundamental than what's your subject line, what's your hook, do you send a video or a picture of yourself holding a sign, or whatever those, the tactic of the day is.
Yeah. So, that's why these 5 questions are so important, right? So the first question is, how do you think about the game and the experience you want to deliver to people? This is the thing that scales. If you need other people to deliver a great buyer experience to your company, they should think like you do about the game. So when I would speak to these people on these coach calls, it happens today, they think about outbound in the wrong way. I speak to CEOs who think if we send 1,000 emails to this type of persona with this copy, we're going to get 500 meetings. That's the wrong way to think about things, right? So that's the first question. How do you think about the game? How you think influences everything else. The second question is, who do you target?
Just real fast before we go to question number 2, when you say how do you think about the game, do you mean how do you think about the overall customer experience you're providing and how it fits in, how outbound fits into that? Is that kind of what you're saying when you say how do you think about the game?
I would separate outbound, right? You have values at Grain in how you operate.
Right.
Those values shine towards your future customers.
Right.
Your outbound should match that. It shouldn't be, this is how we think about outbound. It should be, this is how we think as a company, and that should be reflected in our outbound.
Got it. Okay.
Right. I've lost count of the number of VPs of sales I speak to who talk about, leaving no stone unturned, being educated and being informed about our buyers, but then they go and blast 1,000 templated high-pressure trash emails to their future customers. There's a misalignment there fundamentally that if you do not fix, everything else is going to break.
Interesting.
And you also hire that profile, right? Steve Jobs talks about this a lot. It becomes self-policing after a while. You get 5 really good hires that all think in the same way. It becomes self-policing, right? So that's where I recommend you start. You align on that. The second thing you've got to talk about is targeting. And targeting for me is the biggest lever we have in outbound. We pick who we target, right? And most people don't use this advantage. And targeting for me is who, buyer business, when, the trigger events, and the when has to be answered from the buyer's perspective, not your perspective, not because you have a target to hit.
Before the end of the quarter.
There you go. It could be the end of the quarter if you...
Sorry, keep going. I cut you off.
No, I was going to say it could be the end of the quarter if the CFO has a reporting window at that time where the pain becomes big enough that they think about this problem, right? But it's not because you're missing your target. And then why is the targeting hypothesis, right? The why this buyer and business needs you at this moment, and that needs to be answered from the buyer's perspective. So that targeting hypothesis is the next question that really matters.
Where do you think, on this second question, what are I think everyone has some kind of a target, but where do you think people get it wrong? What are the mistakes people are making?
Yeah, they fish in the ocean, which could be their ICP or TAM, right? And actually SAM or SOM and all these other things.
Right.
And they don't fish in puddles, so very small subsets of that ICP. And even, I think there's room for experimentation outside of the ICP. You've spoken to 100 companies before where their ICP is based on very little. It's based on very little real-world data, and that's common early. I've been so early at these companies, we've had dramatic shifts in our ICP within a quarter.
Right.
So I think to me that suggests that there could be room for experimentation outside of ICP. You, with your popularity in product, right? I think your growth story would have been very different if you'd tried to disrupt Gong, right? It may have been different, I don't know. But that could have been an interesting experiment at a point of time where you say, hey, we're going to use the same product, but reframe it and target a different buyer persona with different jobs to be done, right?
Right.
That stuff fascinates me.
Love it. Okay, so question number 3 now.
3 is offers and asks. Again, I take this from the product world. You have offers in product.
Right.
Ask a question. So you can give something, and you can ask them a question back. And you should align these based on who your puddle is, right?
Right.
Who your very tight targeting hypothesis is. You're going to ask a CFO a different question than you are a director of IT, right?
Right.
And you should align that. You should test 2 to 4 offers and 2 to 4 asks in every single outbound play you do, so you get much more volume through the different variations.
And is the asks here like what questions you're asking them from a content perspective, or asking them to do something in exchange?
Yeah, that's a common question. I like the concept of disruptive questions, right?
Like get them thinking about.
Get them thinking about the problem that they have. Gap questions are another good one. They build lots of credibility. It's not how are you using video in your sales process today, right?
Yeah, I mean that's more. It's not
exactly. It's more targeted into a pain or a job to be done.
Yeah, it's interesting because I get a lot of outbound, and I'm actually surprised how often good questions are asked. Sorry, are not asked. In fact, it usually feels like people are trying to be cute to get my attention.
Yeah.
Like asking some kind of, or saying like, let's partner, millions of dollars on the table, like trying to make me think it's a different thing than them selling to me. I had someone outbound me recently, like trying to make it seem like they were wanting to buy my company. I don't know, just to get me to open the email or whatever. I've seen all sorts of cute things. So I see a lot of cute things. I see a lot of people trying to say stuff that maybe is interesting, but I think a good question is quite effective. And I don't, it's weird that I don't see that used that often, to be honest.
Yeah, this is the divorcing of sales development from real sales. It's happened gradually. The great questions that your sellers are asking in great discovery calls and even later stage can be applied to outbound.
Yeah.
Why not? And it's actually, I bet, Jeff, you'd prefer a question rather than a request for 30 minutes of your time.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, in fact, if you ask me a good question that gets me to think differently, like, wow, I might want to talk to you actually, because you have, but like if you just kind of like try to tell me something or be cute and then ask for my time, I never respond to that.
There you go. I'll give you a really good question that we used before. This was a company we were targeting. We sold accessibility services, so we're targeting businesses who had accessibility lawsuits. We went and got all the data, so we knew who had the problems we solved. We would call up the CFOs and the general counsels, etc., or general counsel mostly, and we'd say, when was the last time someone with a screen reader who's blind tested your website? And they would go, never. So it doesn't even need to be really like pokey or provocative. It can just be something contextual. When was the last time you did this? Kind of assumptive. And they instantly think, oh, wow, we should be doing that, right?
Yeah.
It can be something simple like that.
Okay, so step 3 is offers and asks. What's the fourth question? Step
4 is how do you keep score? And again, this is an alignment point, right? I want to align with you on how we measure what good looks like, right? If a CEO says, I want 50 meetings, and I say, okay, so we can send 50 million emails to your TAM to get those 50 meetings, right? And they're like, no. And it's like, okay.
Right.
So we have to agree on what good looks like in our funnel. And I like focusing on efficiency before volume. I like focusing on efficiency before speed. And especially when you're running early stage experiments, I recommend you focus there. Try to get a high account to meeting conversion rate, for example.
Right.
And lots of people don't even measure the funnel past a meeting being booked, but before a meeting being booked. But it's very easy to do. Most people just don't do it. And again, this is where you set your crawl, walk, run, your North Star metric, everything.
Yep. A lot of our first part of the conversation talked about number 4. And then what would be the final question, the 5th one?
Final question is the tactics, right? It's the least important thing that's informed by everything above. Tactics refer to copy, cadence, script, process steps, channels, etc. And you ask this question like this: what tactics will we start with, or do you want to start with? Because we've agreed at the start that this is an experiment. Right. So we can't hope to get the tactics right first, right? We need a baseline to jump off from, and then we rapidly iterate based on what's happening in front of us in the game. Right? And again, this is like one of those, if we have to align on these things first, and we have to explain that you are not going to find an email template that's going to last for 90 days and just be the winner, right? It might be the winner for a couple of weeks. It might be the winner for a month if you're lucky. But you're going to have to keep trying new things over and over and over again.
I love this. And I think to bring it back to experimentation, essentially what you're saying is when you're defining an experiment, when you're setting up an experiment, you want to have a clear hypothesis across all 5 of these.
Yes.
And I think if I can infer, a lot of people when they run experiments, they're just experimenting with step 5 and nothing else.
Yes.
Or
And they're not even really doing that.
Oh, got it. I want to pull on that thread, but just to continue, it's like essentially, if people are experimenting they're only doing step 5 and they're making a bunch of assumptions about steps 1 through 4, maybe not even explicit assumptions. So I love this idea of setting up your experiments across all 5. One question I have is, when you're running an experiment, sometimes when you change too many variables at one time, it can be difficult to understand what changed things. So how do you, if you are kind of, these can be quite macro, these 5 things, how do you think about what to change in what order, or how to pair changes? How do you just think about coordinating the dials across all 5 of those?
Yeah, I've done this and failed 100 times. So the best way I know how to do it, and I'm sure there's other ways to do it, is you attribute everything to your targeting hypothesis, right? So when we reach out to CTOs doing this job with this buying trigger at this firmographic profile, blah, 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 very detailed small puddle. We use these offers and these asks. We use these set of tactics, but we attribute all the success back to the targeting pool, right? Now, you can reuse offers and asks for different audiences, right?
Right. Right.
You can use the same tactics for different audiences, but you segment your experiments by the targeting hypothesis. That's how it starts.
I see. So you segment by the targeting hypothesis, and you attribute it to the targeting hypothesis. Does that mean to say that if you get a negative experiment that's not working, that you basically say we're not targeting the right person? Or
yeah, that's a really good question. I think it depends on what negative really means. Is it like 0 responses?
Yeah, like very, very, let's say very, very low responses or something along those lines.
I mean, this is the hardest thing. This is what people like. I wish I knew. I wish I could really attribute cause, but I can't, and I don't even want to try.
Right.
But what it will indicate to you is you need to try other things.
Got it.
All right. Whether that's at the same targeting pool with different offers and asks and different tactics, right? It could be that they have blue eyes, and blue-eyed people don't respond to emails, these type of emails and these type of offers, right? That's the reality. Lots of people that say, this is the script that generated $5 million for my company, it could be that the person has a beard, right? That's how randomized lots of the outbound experiments we have are. So this is really the best way I know how to do it. It's not perfect.
Got it. I love it. Okay, so last bit on experimentation, then we'll move to the final little bit of our segment. You mentioned when I said a lot of people are experimenting around step number 5, and then you said, but they're not even doing that. Tell me more about that. It sounds like you had something interesting to say there.
Yeah, it's very rare today that someone will send the exact same email to the exact same person at the exact same type of company with the same offer and same ask. There's very rarely does that happen. The email particularly, deliverability is massively impacted when you start doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I actually chose just not to worry about it. I said there's so much variance in copy, for example, that it doesn't really matter, right? It does matter, but it doesn't matter completely. So what I try to do is keep consistency in obviously targeting offers and asks.
Right.
So you can have different copy, especially with Spintax. Maybe you have it along a certain theme, right? But your offer and your ask is consistent, and that's the difference between the.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So would you say a lot of people are often conflating the tactics with the offer and ask, and they're accidentally switching those when they're not intending to?
Yeah, now I'm very fortunate to have lots of friends who have been doing this like I have forever and been obsessed.
Yeah.
If you speak to them, the real people with grey hair and outbound, they'll tell you the big levers, and again, they can't really prove it. It's more like I've 15 years of gut feeling.
Yeah.
It's targeting one, offers and asks a second, right? The actual tactics about how that message is delivered specifically isn't the thing that drives the actual business result. And when you really go deep down, the thing that really drives it usually comes out in the discovery calls later on down the line. It's like, hey, we were talking about this internally.
Yeah. Interesting.
And engineering that is the gold standard of outbound. That's why when we were targeting those companies with the accessibility lawsuits, we had a 38% close rate, right?
Right.
And it's like, because we knew they were talking about it, the data was literally public, right? So this is what I mean, like, I just think people saying this script or this CTA is the thing that drove all the results. It's really not. I'm sorry.
I think that's a great place to end. So we'll end with a final segment, which I do, which is rapid questions. So
Yes.
I'm going to just ask you some questions and just really rapid responses. So first one is,
Yes.
What are 3 sales tools you're most excited about right now?
Clay, like everyone in the world. I actually built a business plan for something like Clay years ago, and I never did anything about it. It was called Magnet. Noble, I don't know if you heard about Noble. It's social proof technology. Very, 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 very interesting stuff. Social proof is one of the most powerful things you can use in outbound, especially when you're no brand, no demand. Titan X, which used to be called Phone Ready Leads, they tell you, one, who picks up the phone, right?
Right.
Who picks up the phone and they tell you who picks up the phone, basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And it just makes the phone a viable channel in like certain segments. The phone is just not a viable channel, but they can make it viable for you.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, second is, what's your favorite sales quote?
I think I made this up. I may have stolen it, but relevance is, do I care? Personalization is it about me? If you expect me to care, you better make it about me.
Love it.
Yeah.
So that's a lot in a very small few words. That's awesome.
Yes.
And then the final rapid fire question is, what's the biggest challenge you faced last week and how did you solve it?
Yeah, I thought about sharing some client stuff, but then I was like, nah, I can't really tell everyone in the world about that. But there's lots of challenges when you run your own business. But I've been doing it for about 10 months now. I have 3 to 5 clients like ongoing at once, and I keep promising my daughter I'm going to like play with her in the day or do something. And then shit hits the fan, so I have to go and like scramble and jump on calls, or I miss our play slot, and she has the memory of an elephant. She keeps reminding me of it, and it makes me feel terrible. What am I doing about it? I dedicate every morning, Saturday and Sunday morning, most of it, and every morning to actually spend some time with her, so that I hopefully head off the questions before they start coming throughout the day. Can you play with me, etc., etc.
Amazing. I like the personal
Yes.
touch there. All right, now tell us where people who want to learn more from you, where can they find you?
LinkedIn. That's it. I have been rebuilding my website for about 6 months now, and my Outbound Basics, like thinking course, will be out soon. I've actually written it. I've just got to push live and figure out my website stuff. But for now, LinkedIn.
Amazing. Well, we can look forward to that. Harry, it's been a great
Awesome.
chat. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Have a great day.
Likewise.